I'm Jack Barsky. I'm a retired and reformed ex-undercover KGB agent. I'm going to talk a little bit about what it took to morph from the German to an American, where I was successful and where I was not. I spent altogether about 4 years studying English, perfecting to the extent possible an American accent, practicing until I was blue in the face to pronounce English words properly. For instance, one of the hardest things for Germans, one of them is the TH, but things like the difference between hot and hut. I had learned to speak English, write it as well as anybody, but I hadn't become an American culturally. My behavior was still very German. Having now learned the difference between the German style and the American style, I have been trying to adjust and soften the way I'm approaching things. Germans are in your face. They will tell you what they think even if you don't ask for it, and they will criticize you any chance they get. And that was me, and there's still a residue of that left. Americans will be a little more passive, sometimes passive-aggressive, and they wrap everything, every piece of bad news in some kind of a velvet cloth so it doesn't hurt that much. The clothes and the food, that was taken care of by a 3-month practice trip to Canada. Before I was sent to the US, that was, I think, 1977. And, you know, Canada is close enough. So I learned menus, I learned what beer there was being drunk, what wine and liquor, and I bought all kinds of clothes, obviously. Spent a lot of time wandering around in stores and so forth. That was actually a good idea by the KGB to send me on this kind of a training trip. First night, Montreal, I go to a restaurant to eat dinner and I have a beer. That place, they just gave you a bottle. They wouldn't pour it into a glass. So I'm looking at this bottle, I'm calling the waiter and says, "Hey, can I have a bottle opener?" And he looked at me like, "Huh?" And then he twisted the cap off. I had never worked with a bottle where you can twist the cap off. Eventually, I found out watching television, reading the newspaper and so forth, and eventually, started to think, feel, and act more like an American, except for the communication style. When I came to the United States, I was fundamentally, culturally, and psychologically unprepared. I spoke the language as well as anybody, but being an American, not at all. The one thing that saved me was that in the early years, I managed to stay away from inquisitive folks, particularly, say, ladies who were Americans who would quickly find out there's something different about you. What saved me from making these fundamental bad mistakes was that I started interacting with people who didn't care. I worked for 2 years full-time as a bike messenger. That was sort of a transient kind of crew that worked there. You know, one day they work, the next day they're gone. Nobody cared a whole lot and nobody was inquisitive. So I listened a lot and I learned what it was like to live in the country and pretend to have lived in the country for many years. It includes the sports, the movies, celebrities, and all of that stuff that you cannot learn when you're outside of the country. And so I slowly got to a point where I felt comfortable talking and acting as if I were an American, even though I was not aware that my behavior was still clearly traceable to my German roots. If you're looking for people who pay attention to history, if you're looking for people who are spiritual, if you're looking for people who know how to appreciate good food, but this country provides such a variety to folks who live here that you can always find what you're looking for. The one thing that you have here that I believe nowhere else in the world is called freedom with a capital F.